here, and we've got someone in the chat box. Hello. For me, I think we've worked together before. Welcome. Thank you for your message. Angela's just popped in the door. All right, so before we begin, I just want to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land of which we're all gathered today. And I know that we're all in different parts of Australia, but I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. So thank you for being here. My name is Loren Gray from Gray Management Systems, and I am joined with Marc Gehrmann today from HDAA. And I'm just looking at the chat box. This is Ivy. I'm joining from Adelaide. Welcome. Okay, so today, if you are a returning person to my webinar series, I just want to say welcome. Thank you for coming back. It's always good to see some familiar faces and clients that I've been working with. So everyone is welcome here. If this is your first time joining my webinar series, I just want to say a big warm welcome to you. And for anyone watching back this on the replay, hello to you as well. So for those, I've said we've got Marc here. So Marc is actually the program leader at HDAA. And before I actually invite Marc to say hello, and I'm going to give Marc a warm introduction, I just wanted to let you know about a little bit about HDAA. And Marc, feel free to add in anything there that I may have missed. But HDAA is a certification and assessment organisation, and they are located in Queensland, but they have a very large network of assessors in all states and territories of Australia. So they work with all kinds of businesses, small to large national organisations, specifically working in the health and human service areas, and obviously the NDIS. So I've been working with HDAA as an assessor now for just over 12 months, and I feel very proud to be part of their team. So Marc, I just want to say thank you for being here today and giving up your time. I know that you're really busy, and I just wanted to give some background to yourself by way of introduction too, if that's okay. So just to let everyone know, this is a real treat to have Marc here today. So that's why I'm saying please use the chat box and ask all the questions that you've got around assessment, because Marc is extremely helpful and knowledgeable. So he's well experienced working in the health and human services organisations, especially around research, strategic planning, program development, and of course auditing as well. And he also has an impressive list of qualifications, including an honours degree in psychology, a grad certificate in the health industry management, and he also has work that's been published. So we're in the company of an author here as well. So Marc, is there anything else you'd like to add about HDAA? And because it'd be really great if you could tell everyone about your current role there and what your team actually does.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me for starters. Enjoy these kind of activities, and it's always great to talk to you as well, Loren, and always happy to share knowledge and be as supportive as we can to providers out there. Not much to add for myself, but HDA, as you said, is a certification body, and we assess organisations across Australia to a number of standards, NDIS being one of them. My role here is the NDIS program leader, so I manage the NDIS program. I'm also a lead auditor and don't go out on site much these days, more in the managerial sort of side of things. But yeah, that's I guess me in a nutshell, and what we do at HDA.
Yeah, great, thank you. It's a pleasure for you to be here. So today we're going to be focusing on some of those common non-conformities, issues and trends that we see in NDIS audit assessment. And I think it's really important to share information where we can, especially in the NDIS network as well. So I really trust that everyone's going to take something away from this webinar today. Just to give you a little recap of what to expect, we're going to go through and just briefly touch on the difference between approved quality auditors and how that compares to the actual NDIS Commission. We're then going to talk around some of that planning and some of the potential problems or issues or things that happen around that time, and especially around registration groups. So we'll just shed a bit more light about what providers can do to really prepare for audit. We're going to talk obviously about the common non-conformities, issues and trends that we see. I did want to touch base just around purchase manuals and what you could do to really assist your business to sort of take that to the next level and make it appropriate where needed for your actual business. And then we've got some tips on setting up your business for success. So I'll be asking Marc, pumping him for some advice in those areas. And then I'll just give you a brief overview of the current health checks that I'm conducting at the minute for my clients. So that's what to expect. We've got about 40 minutes and this will also be pre-recorded. So feel free to share this with your colleagues there. And that's me there, Loren Gray, current auditor and also educator, working with Gray Management Systems. So that's the family company. We are a registered organisation. So I will say, I understand what it's like being on the other side of an audit, even though I am out there auditing. I also have a set of standards that I have to meet with the Australian Skills Quality Authority, and it can be a nerve-wracking experience. So I want to say that it's all good and well. I can talk about auditing from an auditor point of view, but I do also have that understanding and experience of what it feels like to be on the other side of the fence as well. So I'm just going to stop sharing now so we can actually see you, Marc. What I wanted to do is maybe let's start with how does your team actually support providers in the lead up to, say, an NDIS assessment?
Yeah, sure. So we have a dedicated team of support staff, and that team works with providers, their clients, from start to finish of their assessment and the coordination of their assessment. So basically it begins with going through what we call the service description and really going through a fine-tooth comb about to set the scope of the audit. So the registration groups that providers apply for, and then there's some other sort of key areas that were required, commissions, guidelines to look for and include in the audit. We work with providers on a regular basis throughout that process. So the team is very qualified and knowledgeable. So any sort of technical questions that providers have, they can ask the team. As a certification body, we have to be very careful. We can't, we're a third party auditor. So we can't actually provide any consulting work or specific advice. We can just point people in the right direction or explain the reasons we're asking for certain information or what a registration group means in terms of the corresponding module. So we provide that level of support, and then obviously the whole coordination process of setting the dates for your stage 1, stage 2, or if it's a verification audit. Yeah, so that's essentially what the team does.
Yeah, and it's a big process too. And I just also want to say that for especially a lot of businesses, that have really invested their life into these businesses, it's a really big deal, isn't it?
It is a big deal. It's one of the things that I guess sometimes can be a shock to providers when they first enter the NDIS market. Around price and I guess the amount of work that's involved. And so the more support you can get from a certification body, obviously the better. And that's certainly something we pride ourselves at HDAA, and certainly something we really work hard with providers to provide that level of support.
Absolutely. Now, at the beginning, I talked about a little bit about HDAA in the introduction. Now, HDAA are an approved quality auditor. So did you just want to go through what that actually means and how that compares to, the actual NDIS commission? Because I know sometimes people get a bit not sure about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So in NDIS language, we're an approved quality auditor, which just means that we are one of the certification bodies that the Commission has approved to provide NDIS audits to providers out there in the market. And just, I guess, commenting on your comments as well in terms of HDA as a certification body, we also sit in two worlds. So we get audited ourselves, and I have the privilege as the NDIS program leader. I get audited every 6 months. So we have an accreditation body called Jazz Hands, which basically runs the scheme, and they audit me every 6 months, my team and I. So we do know what it's like, and we certainly go to great lengths to make sure that we're as collaboratively in our approach with providers and as we possibly can. So yeah, it's good that you said that, because it is a really important point to make, that we do know what it's like. We do, for lack of putting it a better way, that the pain or anxiety that can come with that sometimes. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So in terms of well, the difference between us is, so it's a little bit different in the NDIS to other schemes in terms of certification. And I'm not sure how many of the people in the webinar at the moment work for with current providers who are certified to perhaps other standards. Typically, it's the certification body that makes the decision. So the decision to certify you, and the certification body has that power. Under the NDIS, it's a little bit different. So it's actually the commission that makes the registration decision, and all of the power in terms of the decision making lies with the commission, and they govern all the rules. What the certification bodies or the approved quality auditors do is we go out, we work with you, we conduct the audit. We then make a recommendation to the commission. And then the commission has its own sort of machinery around decision-making and evaluating providers' suitability. And then they make the final registration decision. So that's how I guess it's a little bit different, the distinction between the two entities and how it differs to other sort of schemes.
And I like how you talk about how we work with you to conduct the assessment, because that's really what it is. It's a joint process, isn't it? And that's how it really should be, to be honest.
Absolutely. And I think, look, our philosophy is that we're here for one main reason, and that's to ensure that the most vulnerable people in society, that we ensure that they're provided with quality services. And we all play a different role in that, and our role is to conduct audits. And we work with organisations collaboratively. We really focus on quality improvement, and you'll notice at HDAA we don't use terms like audit or auditors. We call our audits assessments. We call our auditors assessors. It might seem like a semantics, but for us it's a philosophical distinction that we really try hard to emphasise, because it's about conducting a quality assessment on how your organisation meets the requirements of the standards.
Yeah.
There are compliance components to it, where things are black and white. Either staff have the appropriate worker screening or they don't. That's really a black and white area. But there are many different ways in which a provider might have a supervision model framework. So it's about evaluating the context and size of the organisation and how that particular system works for that organisation.
Absolutely. And I think what you were saying too, like the practice standards are quite prescriptive in some areas, but I really like what you're saying, and I think this is probably a key message for assessors, really, to keep an open mind, to keep your opinions to yourself, and to really listen and see and get, work with the provider to demonstrate, for them to demonstrate how it fits for them and really works for them, as opposed to us coming in with our opinions of why would you do it that way, or, there's there's no time for things like that, I don't think, anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's another reason we hire, all our assessors come from health and human services kind of background, because we don't hire people from the mining sector or who have been in oil and gas, even though they might be exceptional auditors. We're dealing with human beings, and we're dealing with a lot of grey in the work that we do. So it's really important that we take that perspective. So that's our philosophy, and that's fine.
And we've just got a lovely comment here from Tricia Hughes, who they're a wonderful provider down in Victoria and Warrnambool. And she's just said here, Mark, we use HDAA, can't recommend them highly enough, located in regional Victoria and standards. Yes, NDIS Human Services and 9001. She's got the whole shebang happening down there. And Tricia, you're doing some excellent work. We had a great chat yesterday about risk management. So thank you for being here, Tricia.
Thanks for the feedback, Tricia, and you'd no doubt be working with Nicola's team. So it's a different team, but thanks for the feedback. That's fantastic. I'll definitely pass it on to Nicola.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, Marc, and I think this is a really good, sometimes it can be difficult to, for people to identify the different registration groups, especially if they're a first-time provider registry. But even as their businesses expand or grow and they've got that capacity to then select, where would they, what's your advice about actually how to navigate all those different registration groups and work out what they actually need?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of information out there. Look, if you're a new provider, you may have got information or advice somewhere that says, just apply for everything. I would discourage you from doing that because I haven't come across many providers that do everything. I don't think I ever have. Even the very large providers don't do everything. So it's not great advice because the main reason is there are a whole bunch of requirements for different registration groups. And some of those registration groups trigger what we call modules. So we have the core module of the practice standards, but then we have also some specialized modules as well. So it can increase the cost of your assessment significantly, particularly if you're not actually delivering services or have that sort of structure set up yet. So be very mindful of what it is you're actually doing, and specifically what it is you're going to be doing. In terms of finding out information, it is challenging. Talk to your approved quality auditor. There is information out there. So the pricing arrangements, which was formerly the price guide, has a bunch of information. So that's the Commission's pricing structure and guides. They'll sort of outline what that registration group is in terms of service delivery and the type of services that's expected in that. The verification guide, even for certification, even for providers who are going for certification, is a good resource because it outlines the different kind of qualifications and professional memberships that are required for certain registration groups. So, for example, if you were to select therapeutic supports, which is 128, even if you're going through a certification audit, you still have to demonstrate that the people in your organisation have the appropriate qualifications for professional membership. So that might be something like the psychologists and their ARPA registration, things like that. So do your homework, talk to your approved quality auditor, and just be mindful of advice that sort of says, just apply for everything and your auditor will sort it out, because it can get painful, it can get time consuming, and it can get expensive.
That's exactly, and I think that's probably why I wanted to bring it up, because it's an investment, the assessment process and registration process. So anything to save providers that money, that's a good thing too. Just in relation to how challenging is it if an existing provider decides, well, now I want to venture off into this area, maybe they have clients who are seeking additional services and they think we can do that. How easy is it to add those registration groups onto to their registration?
So that'd be my advice as well. So you can always add on registration groups later on. If it's an area that you're not 100% sure that you want to go down there, you just want to feel the waters first. And that's what we call that a scope extension or an out of cycle assessment or audit. And there are processes in place for that. So it's similar to the process of just your initial registration with the Commission. You contact the Commission, you tell them that you want to, if I remember their terminology, I think it is a variation of registration, and there's an application process with the Commission, and then you notify your AQA, your approved quality auditor, and then that sort of triggers off some ID numbers for that scope extension. And then it's the same process. We just basically confirm with you, yes, you definitely want to, let's say you want to do specialised support coordination, which is module 4. We confirm with you, yep, you definitely want to go for that registration group. Here's what it means. Here's the module that you'll have to be assessed to. And we set some dates. We organise the assessment, give you the plan. It's a fairly straightforward process. It does take some time, but in terms of the process itself, it is fairly straightforward.
Absolutely. No, that's good. I think that's good advice. You can always add in down the track. So we've just had a few more people join us. So welcome, and I can see Connie. Welcome. Hi, Connie, and hi, Katrina and Deborah. Thank you for being here. Marc, I just wanted to, we've got a question here from Tamika. Marc, she's asking, will a variation of registration always lead to an out-of-cycle audit? It's a good question, actually.
Well, it's a good question. I don't have to take, so here's an example. So if you decide that you want to add a registration group that just fits under the core module, you're already certified. It's a slightly different process, and it will rarely require an audit. If it's for something like what I said before, 128 therapeutic supports, we would have to do like a desktop review, because there are specific requirements attached to that registration group. But the registration group is low risk, or considered what the Commission says low risk, and it also falls under the module. So it'd be a fairly straightforward process. The variation of registration and the out-of-cycle audits are in those situations where you've decided to, let's use another example, you want to build a specialist disability accommodation home. That requires module 5. So you actually have to be assessed to a part of the practice standards that you weren't previously assessed to. So no, it won't always lead to an actual audit itself, but it is sort of dependent on what registration group we're speaking about.
Hopefully that answers your question, Tamika. And if there is something specific there that you wanted to know, just add that in as well. And we can come back to some good examples there, Marc, too. Thanks for sharing that. I just wanted to now talk about the recent conference that you and the HDAA team were involved with the National Disability Service, the NDS, not the NDIS.
Yeah.
Because part of that was there was others, approved quality auditors that came together, didn't they? And they were discussing those common trends and issues that were that were being seen during assessment. So I'm just wondering, what learnings can you share with our audience today?
Yeah. So there was 2 other certification bodies there. It was HICA and Q Audit. So the managers of those programs joined the NDIS. I'm the same. It's not the best acronym for a sector body, the NDS. And so. Look, one of the questions around that, it was a similar kind of webinar or forum as we're having now. One of the questions that sort of came up is sort of common trends. And it's a really hard thing to pinpoint common trends, mainly because there is so much variability in the size and scope of NDIS providers out in the community, from, mum and dad working out of their office in home supporting, 4 or 5 participants, to a large multi-state organisation with 5,000 staff. So it's difficult. I guess the conclusion that all 3 of us came to is that there are some commonalities. So where we see more non-conformities than in other groups is probably module 1. So module 1 is where people provide clinical services. So I'm thinking things like complex bowel care and things like that. The standards are quite prescriptive in that sense, and I think even organisations who were working in that space before, they're confronted with a new set of requirements, and there can be non-conformities more so in that module than say other modules. I guess the other area would be module 2 and module 2A. Also a lot of confusion around that. So those 2 modules are your behaviour support. And I guess the best way to kind of distinguish those 2 is that module 2 is those providers writing the actual behaviour support plans with the restrictive practices. So, your psychologists or your counsellors or people that are trained to do that. Module 2A are the providers that are implementing those behaviour support plans. So there are, again, and those 2 modules kind of work into play with one another, because the standards kind of the providers who write the plan have to work with the implementers and vice versa in terms of data collection. So there are some quite specifics in those modules, and there's quite specific indicators relating to reporting to the Commission, your monthly reports, and zero reports. So there's some nuances. So we see some trends in terms of the higher level of non-conformities in those. And I use, where else? And then in the core module, I guess sort of incident management, sometimes complaints management, areas in governance that there's a few indicators that providers may not have seen before and other standards that they have to adjust to. And I guess that's the other comment I'd make is, for providers who are entering the market, be aware that it's not just the practice standards, but there are also legislation embedded into the practice standards. So the example would be incident management. There are the incident management rules, which is legislative rules that you also have to comply with. And same with complaints management, the complaints management embedded into the practice standards. So we can see some gaps in there as well.
And it's the same with restrictive practices, actually. So, and it's interesting, like talking from the point of view with the clients that I work with, I know that you've sort of covered off on quite a few of the common things that you've already mentioned there, but just to add that around quality management. So they might have an audit schedule, but they haven't yet started conducting those internal audits too, which is a really great way to identify those gaps in the business, but also risk management too. Quite often you'll see providers are really focused on doing a great job with identifying those risks or hazards in relation to, the people that they're serving, the participants, but they sometimes forget about the risks relevant to their business, the financial risks, work health safety sometimes, and information management, so around data breaches and things of that nature too. So
absolutely, good point. It's another one where we see a lot in, and the other thing I think we see as well, and I think we're going to touch on it a little bit, but sometimes we see U-Butte risk management policies and plans, but when we ask for the implementation, the organisation may not have given enough thought about what the risks are to them as an organisation. They might be, like you say, really focused on risk to participants themselves, and then sort of having mitigating strategies around those risks. So,
absolutely. And here we've got Tamika's just said, thank you. What recommendations would you have for providers when building an internal NDIS audit program? Well, I could speak all day about this, Tamika. But essentially, if you're at the very beginning and you've never done an audit program or a schedule or a plan before, really having a look at your business process in those key areas. So I would just begin with, say, your client journey, first of all, mapping that out, having a look at all the important processes that really help, meet the expectations of your clients, essentially. So having a look at, conducting an audit on your, the intake or the initial assessment process, having a look at the different areas that support your service delivery. Then obviously equally important is actually looking at that staff journey. So looking at that process from recruitment right through to onboarding, training, education, and then right through to, them actually doing the work as well. So if you started doing some little internal audits on some of those key processes in your business, and then over time you could build that out to be a little bit more sophisticated, that would be a really great sort of start. Anything else for you to add there, Marc?
Yeah, look, obviously representing a certification body, I have to be fairly careful and how much advice I can give. But what you've said, absolutely. Focus in on those, I guess, more compliance-driven parts of the standards, your worker screening, your risk to participants, and really mapping it against the practice standards themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully that's answered your question, Tamika. Happy to have a further chat offline about that. So now let's just talk about purchase manuals, so pre-written policies and procedures. So a lot of my consulting work, so I've got my consultant's hat on here, really centres around actually helping clients tailor the types of packages that they've bought, simplifying them, removing duplication. I think the most I've ever seen is 4 different types of manuals covering off on different areas, and really there's a lot of crossover there, and it can get quite messy. So from an assessment point of view or a certification point of view, Marc, what are some of the challenges that you see that present for providers when it comes to assessment if they've just purchased that manual and that's all they've done with it, really?
Yeah. Look, my philosophy, I guess, is there's nothing wrong with buying a framework or bringing in a consultant to do that. But like anything in an open market, there are differences in terms of the quality. So I would just caution people to do their homework and be very do their due diligence, I guess, when they're engaging a service that will write their policies and procedures, or when you're buying a suite of policy procedures. We do get providers who will say, well, I've spent thousands of dollars and they've told me I'll pass my audit. It's not how it works. Be very careful. And I've been on site and I've seen people give me this U-Butte policy manual and have everything in it, including how to access the nuclear codes. But it's not tailored to what it is that they do. And I guess, I'd really emphasize that the practice standards, no practice standards are perfect, but if you come at it from a quality perspective and look at the practice standards, and if you can use it as a framework, then it sets you up to provide quality services. So don't see this process as just a barrier to your business, but as a quality improvement. And really, if you are going to go down that path of purchasing policies, that's okay, but revise them and make them tailored to what it is you do. And also, where it says insert organisation name, insert organisation name. But yeah, that's in a nutshell what I'd buy.
That's some good advice. And look, the reason why I just wanted to raise this was because, especially I see a lot of your smaller providers, and they've got this really over the top heavy manual, and it's just really excessive. It's not relevant. It's not appropriate for their business. They might be a sole trader. They might have, a handful of contractors or whatever it is. And it's not really there to support them or support their staff. And I always sort of say when things go wrong, especially say, for example, an incident, and it's, hopefully something that happens only once in a blue moon, you can get that procedure out and go, what do I need to do now? How do I make that report to the commission? There it is. Oh, right. Beautiful. It's a guide. It's a support, about how to do that work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, do it well.
Yeah, and I think that's where people, maybe new providers entering the market, might find that challenging. Is we're not just looking at your policies and procedures, we're actually looking at implementation too. So if your policy says we have a governance risk management meeting every month, the assessor will say, hey, can I have a look at those meeting minutes? And then it's tailor it to your organisation. And the other thing I would add is, you don't feel like you have to have some sort of documentation for every indicator.
No.
Not every indicator or outcome in the standards require you to have documentation. There are some that require you to have documentation, and there are others that don't, but documentation helps. But you don't have to write some sort of policy for every single indicator. It's just not needed.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, and that's part of when, as an assessor, looking for evidence it's not just the documentation, it's in conversations. We can draw that evidence out. It's through our observations as well. And, it's not just a policy and procedure. You could have videos, flow charts, work instructions, lots of things. You are all unique. And I think so, therefore, it should be unique to you as well and appropriate. So thank you for that. Marc, I just want to go back to a question that's come through from a participant here. So any tools or systems to assist in the mapping of the client or staff journey? So I would say, well, that's something I would do with clients. So I would sit down. So I'm just trying to think of any tools or systems, but really it's essentially getting the right people in the right room who, you know, are involved in all these areas. So, you know, that depending on how big your the organisation is, you might be speaking with maybe 3 different managers to get the whole picture together, and just sort of nutting it out, and even starting with a flow chart or some sort of diagram that can really show visually what that looks like, and then going, right, what have we got to support this process here? Are there work instructions? Is there a procedure? Are there templates or forms or whatever that might be? Do you know of any specific tools or systems, Mark, off the top of your head?
No, look, back in my research days and research consultant days, I did a lot of direct mapping. It's more of I'm not aware of any tools. It's really just following the process that you probably laid out. And,
yeah.
And the people that you know the organisation or know the process are usually the best people to conduct that.
Yeah, that's it. And even for getting someone to facilitate that, you know, internally or externally to come in and do that. So thank you very much for your question. And Magna has just said, for me as an assessor, the challenges I see are policy procedure manuals which have gaps in relation to the NDIS standards. Yes, I see this as so much too. And irrelevant information to the business. For example, referring to a HR department for a business, which is a one-person business. Yes, I see that a lot too. That's really hard, isn't it? Or manuals which do not even refer to the NDIS. Yeah, they've been written for maybe another standard. Yeah, that's that's hard, isn't it? That's you know, that's what we get paid to do, but it can be quite stressful and you know, painful for providers who have laid out a lot of money for this type of work. So thank you for your comment, Magna. Thank you very much. So I just wanted to say, so I'm all about having, I think as all assessments should be, you know, a really positive experience. You know, yes, it is an assessment like you were talking about earlier. And yes, we do have to identify whether or not businesses are meeting those minimum requirements of the standards. But I see assessment as a really great opportunity to give the tree a really good shake, a health check. Are there any gaps? Are there any sort of opportunities for improvement, that real value add? And I know that that's the philosophy and drive behind HDAA, is to really value add to those assessments too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, you know, and we use, like when I'm on site, I use the term gap. If we do find something, you know, it's a gap, we work with you to identify, is it actually a gap, or is there other ways in which you evidence that we haven't actually seen? We explore that further. But it's also, look, if it is a gap, and there's not many providers, even experienced providers, who come out without 1 or 2 minor gaps that they have to address. Simply because it's a new standard. I mean, it's not a new standard anymore, but when people went through it for the first time, or do go through it for the first time, there are some nuances that maybe other practice standards don't have. It's not a bad thing. It's not at the end of the world. I hate the term nonconformity. Unfortunately, I don't write the legislation or make the rules. So we do use those terms in a formal sense, but they're gaps. And I think the philosophy for us is, look, aren't we glad that we found that gap? Here's what we would then write a corrective action, which is, look, you know, here's what we believe needs to be addressed, and then you go and address it. And we're not specific on how you address it. It's just this is a gap that we've identified that needs to be addressed. It's all about quality improvement. Like I said, we get audited every 6 months. Sometimes you've got to go, yeah, that's probably a better way of doing it, or that's what it should be about.
Absolutely. And here we've just got to, and please, we're about to come to the end of the webinar. So if you do have a question, here's your chance to pop it in the chat box now. But this question from Diksha: I'm preparing for my midterm audit. Does the auditor come for stage 2, or do we do it via Zoom because of COVID? So that's going to be a question specific for the approved quality auditor, Mark, but I know that, you know, obviously there's a lot of assessments happening via Zoom or other types of online platforms at the minute.
That's right. Yeah. So like I said before, there's an accreditation body that sits over all certification bodies. So we're accredited and organisations are certified. As part of that, there are certain rules. I won't bore anyone. It's not sleep time yet. But there are rules, and one of the rules is that any certification body that provides remote assessing, so through Zoom, is accredited to what they call MD4. We are accredited. I think most certification bodies are, but certainly in these, unprecedented times, I'm not sure who the person's quality auditor is, but that's certainly our approach. Wherever there's a lockdown, we either shift to remote assessment, which we call technical assisted assessments, and you can read about all our methodologies online on our website, or we try to postpone the assessment. We try to avoid that because we're usually dealing with strict timeframes within the cycle, but certainly we support our clients and shifting quickly to remote assessments.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. And just this last question, does HDA assist with internal audits?
No, we don't. So again, as a certification body, we're a third-party auditor, and someone like Loren would be considered a second-party auditor who can come in and do those, assist with your audit processes or any consulting work. But as a certification body, we cannot engage in any type of consulting.
Yeah. Oh, good. Thanks, Mark. And Tricia, just last year, we did a full re-accreditation last year, 5 days of Zoom. It went pretty smoothly. Oh, that's really good to hear. 5 days of Zoom. That's a long week, isn't it?
It is a long week, yeah.
I think you would have slept well, hopefully, at the end of the week, Tricia. That's a big one. All right, well, we're coming to the end. So if there are no more questions, we've got another one here from a panelist, Mark. So just curious to know if anyone has had a similar issue when adding additional registration groups. We're looking to add 0114 and 0128, and was originally informed that we needed to have staff employed to be able to add these groups. It became really confusing. So 0128 for everyone is therapeutic supports. And off the top of your head, what's 114, Mark? We'll have to look it up quickly.
114 is community nursing.
It is, yeah. Yeah.
No, you can be provisionally assessed to those.
Yeah.
What you do have to have in place is appropriate systems and processes. If you don't yet have staff, what the assessors would be looking for is appropriate position descriptions, things like that. Yeah, but I don't know what the specific conversation you've had in the past, so I couldn't give you specifics.
Yeah. So I would definitely go back to your approved quality auditor there for that person asking the question, but thank you very much for asking. So I just want to thank you, Marc, for your time today. You've been really helpful. Really appreciate, answering all my questions, and I really appreciate your positive outlook and as well on assessment, and obviously that's what HDAA are all about, and certainly how Gray management systems are aligned as well. So I really appreciate you being here. Thank you to everyone for joining. Yes, of course, you can get my email. I'll pop it in the chat box right now. You're going to get a follow-up email from me, probably, I think it comes out a day after. And that's just so there'll be and you'll be able to access a replay of this webinar so you can share it with your other colleagues. Also too, there's option there to book in a short consulting session with me if you have any questions around your documentation, around internal auditing, anything to do with the current systems and processes that you have in place. So feel free to reach out. I just want to say a really big thank you for everyone for being here. I really enjoy working in this space, and thank you for giving up your precious time today to be with us. So thank you to you all. All right, we'll leave it there. Thanks, Marc.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, and thanks, Magda, too, for your input there, and thank you for everyone that asked questions. Take care, everyone.